Most people treat their vegetable garden the same in June and July as they did back in April. Same watering can, same feeding schedule, same "I'll deal with it later" attitude toward the weeds creeping in between the rows. Then August hits. The tomatoes stop setting fruit, the leaves start yellowing, the squash looks tired, and everyone acts surprised, like it just happened overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It happened over the last few weeks, one small missed thing at a time. And here's the part most people don't realize. Right now, before the real heat of August lands, is the window where your garden either gets set up to keep producing all summer or quietly starts running out of steam. The plants are established at this point. Root systems are in place, foliage is full, and the plants are putting on serious growth. Whatever you do in the next couple weeks decides whether you're pulling baskets of tomatoes, peppers, and zucchini in September, or standing in a garden that technically has plants in it but not much actually coming off them. If you want more of this, actual practical garden advice that saves you a wasted season instead of vague tips you've already heard 100 times, go ahead and subscribe. New videos come out every week, and this one's got 4 things you need to handle before August rolls in. First one, watering. This is where most gardens quietly fail, and it's rarely because people forget to water. It's because they water wrong. A quick splash every evening feels productive. The soil surface looks dark and damp, you feel like you did your job, and you move on with your day. But that kind of watering barely gets past the top inch of soil. It never reaches the deeper root zone, which means the roots never have a reason to grow down looking for it. They stay shallow, clustered right near the surface, because that's where the water always shows up. The problem with shallow roots is that they're fragile. The moment a real heat wave hits and that top inch of soil bakes dry in an afternoon, there's no reserve underneath to fall back on. The plant stresses, the leaves wilt even if you watered that same morning, and fruit that was forming often gets dropped as the plant tries to conserve energy just to survive. What you want instead is a deep, slow soak, 2 to 3 times a week rather than a light sprinkle every single day. You're aiming for enough water that it soaks down 6 to 8 inches into the soil. A simple way to check is to stick a finger or even a trowel into the ground about half an hour after watering. If it's still dry a couple inches down, you haven't given it enough, and you need to run the water longer next time. Timing matters too. Morning is the best window, ideally before 9 a.m. if your schedule allows it. Watering early gives the plant time to take up moisture before the heat of the day hits, and it means the leaves have a chance to dry off before nightfall, which cuts down significantly on fungal issues. And whenever you can, water at the base of the plant instead of overhead with a sprinkler. Wet leaves sitting in direct sun, or wet leaves sitting overnight, are both basically an open invitation for blight, powdery mildew, and other diseases that spread fast once they get a foothold. Second, feeding, and this is where a lot of people get it backwards without even realizing it. Early in the season, a nitrogen-heavy fertilizer makes sense, because at that stage you want the plant focused on leafy growth, building up a strong frame before it worries about anything else. But once your tomatoes, peppers, squash, and beans start flowering and setting fruit, too much nitrogen starts working against you. It keeps pushing the plant to grow more leaves and more stem, instead of putting that energy into flowers and fruit. You end up with a jungle of healthy-looking green with surprisingly little to actually harvest. The fix is simple. Switch to a fertilizer that's higher in phosphorus and potassium once flowering starts. Phosphorus supports root and flower development, and potassium supports overall fruit quality and the plant's ability to handle stress, which matters a lot once summer heat is in full swing. Feed every 2 to 3 weeks rather than dumping a big dose all at once, since a slow, steady supply works with the plant instead of shocking it. One more detail that trips people up. Always water after applying fertilizer, whether it's granular or liquid. Applied to dry soil in full sun, fertilizer can sit on the surface, concentrate around the base of the plant, and actually burn the roots instead of feeding them. A quick watering afterward moves those nutrients down where the roots can actually use them. Third, mulch. And if you haven't done this yet, it's honestly one of the highest return jobs in the entire garden for the amount of effort it takes. Laying down a 2 to 3 inch layer of straw, shredded leaves, or bark around your plants does 3 separate jobs at once, all of which matter more as summer goes on. First, it locks moisture into the soil, which means you're not fighting evaporation all day every day, and the deep watering you're doing actually stays where you put it longer. Second, it keeps the soil temperature more stable. Bare soil in direct sun can swing wildly between hot days and cooler nights, and that temperature swing stresses root systems. A mulch layer smooths that out. Third, it smothers a good chunk of the weeds before they even get a chance to establish, which means less time on your knees pulling weeds later in the season when the heat makes that job miserable anyway. One thing to keep in mind, leave a small gap, a couple inches, between the mulch and the actual stem of each plant. Piling mulch right up against the stem traps moisture right there against the plant tissue, and that's a common way to invite stem rot, especially in humid stretches. Fourth, pests, disease, and keeping the plants actually producing instead of just surviving. This is the stretch of the season where things can go sideways fast if you're not paying attention, because bugs and fungal problems move quickly once warm, humid weather sets in. A garden that looked completely clean a week ago can have a real aphid problem or the early signs of blight seemingly out of nowhere. The fix is simple but requires consistency. Walk your garden every couple of days, not once a week. Check the undersides of leaves specifically, not just the tops, since that's where most eggs, larvae, and early-stage infestations hide out of sight. Yellow spots, curling leaves, a sudden hole-punched look, or a sticky residue on the leaves are all signs that something's starting, and catching it early is the difference between a 5-minute fix and losing a whole section of the garden. If you spot aphids or a small early infestation, a strong blast of water from the hose, or a simple insecticidal soap usually handles it without needing anything stronger. Wait 2 weeks to deal with it though, and that same small problem has often multiplied into something that's much harder to control. The same logic applies to disease. Pull off any yellowing, spotted, or clearly diseased leaves right away instead of leaving them on the plant, and don't toss anything diseased into the compost pile, since that just gives it a way to come right back next season. And here's one more thing that a lot of people overlook entirely: harvest consistently. With plants like zucchini, beans, and cucumbers in particular, leaving mature vegetables sitting on the vine actually signals the plant to slow down its overall production. Biologically, its job is done once it's produced a seed-bearing fruit, so it shifts energy elsewhere. Pick regularly, even if some vegetables come off a little smaller or underripe, and the plant keeps pushing out new ones instead of winding down. A garden that's harvested on a consistent schedule will genuinely outproduce one that's only picked occasionally, sometimes by a surprising margin. So that's the 4. Water deep and less often, instead of a daily splash that never reaches the roots. Switch your fertilizer to support flowers and fruit, instead of just leaves once your plants start blooming. Get mulch down now, while the soil still has moisture worth locking in, before the hottest stretch of summer arrives. And stay consistent on pests, disease, and harvesting so small problems get caught before they turn into a lost crop. None of this is complicated, and none of it takes more than an hour or two spread across the next couple weeks. But here's the pattern worth remembering. The gardens that are still loaded with tomatoes, peppers, and zucchini in September aren't the ones that got attention in August, once things have already started slipping. They're the ones someone paid attention to right now, while there's still time for it to make a real difference.